Hi, everyone. Welcome to our last academic success webinar of this semester. Today, it looks like we will be covering final exams. I am Ashley Bray. I am the Disability and Learning Skills Advisor at the School of Continuing Studies for the Academic Resource Center, and I'll let my colleague introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Annie Bolot, the Learning Skills Specialist on main campus. So you can find me in the Levy Center, 3rd floor, right next to the Women's Center. We have a brand new space, so come on, stop by. We've got a lot of good resources on our website too that we will also go through on this webinar and point out to you. But feel free to stop by the office, just get to know me, and we can help in any way that you need.
I just want to make sure that everyone can hear us. So if you can't hear us, put us in chat, but I think we're live and going. All right. Thanks for patience while we work out some of the housekeeping issues. So before we get started, just wanted to remind everyone of our social media where you guys can stay up to date on upcoming webinars. This is especially important as you guys go home for winter break and come back in spring. You can see all of our upcoming webinar schedules. You can also go and check us out on academicsupport.georgetown.edu. There we have a lot of wonderful downloadable academic resources, drop-in foreign language tutoring hours if you are a main campus student, other campus resources, as well as ARC newsletters. So make sure you're following us on Facebook. It's at ARC Georgetown, and on Instagram at ARC_Georgetown. All right, as I mentioned, we will be back. We'll be taking a pause for winter break, well earned for everyone, and we will be back in January of 2019. We were actually just kind of finalizing the webinar schedule today, so make sure you stay connected with us, and we will send that out at the beginning of the spring semester. All right, hopefully starting out with a little bit of light humor. Finals is a very stressful, chaotic time for everyone. And so one of the things that we like to talk a lot about is how are you using your time wisely? I'm just going to make sure that everyone's muted, but making sure that you're using your time wisely. So this webinar, we're going to get into a little bit around just general time management strategies, some resources that we have available, but also looking at test prep strategies for different types of specific exams, and talking a little bit about study schedules. Again, if you guys are having any technical difficulties or need to ask a question, go ahead and do so in chat and we can get to those at the end.
Okay, so let's jump on in. All right, so what the main thing that we want to start out with is start studying now. So especially for cumulative exams or
So one of the things that we want to talk about is we want to make sure that we start studying now for final exams. We want to make sure that we're organizing our materials, and this should really be taking place ahead of final exams. And hold on 1 minute. Okay, sorry about that, guys. I wanted to make sure everyone was muted because we had some background noise. So like I said, we want to make sure that you're maximizing your time because we know this is, especially this semester with study days are shortened. I think we went from 3 to 2. We want to make sure that you're maximizing your time. So how are you using your 15-minute breaks or long metro commuting rides? And also now's the time to think about how you're planning out your study days. So just a kind of casual reminder for everyone, study days this semester are December 11th and 12th. And just as I mentioned earlier, this is a decrease from what we've had in the past. We're going down to 2 study days. So it's even more important that you make sure you're starting to do the prep work ahead of time. And again, making sure that you're using your resources on campus. This is, again, a very chaotic, very stressful time. So if you need to, are you going to CAPS? Are you going to office hours? Are you connecting with other students in your class? Are you forming study groups? Are you coming to the ARC if you need to? Are you utilizing our resources? So this is a good way to kind of keep us prepped.
Okay, so the first resource that we're going to look at is this final exam preparation worksheet that's actually listed on our website. Underneath academic support, academic resources, you'll find a tab for exam prep, and then it's listed as the final exam prep handout. And we're going to work through this together, or kind of just show you the different steps that we would recommend you do when thinking about what your final exams look like. But just so that you know where this information is, I would go ahead, recommend print it out so that you can physically be writing on it. Again, if you go to academicsupport.georgetown.edu, go to our academic support tab. It's underneath our academic resources for you to utilize and print off. And the first step that we're going to look at is listing each of the courses that you are currently in. And maybe it would be a great time to do a grade check. Think about, maybe go on Canvas, talking to professors or TAs to say, where am I currently at in all of my courses right now? Just so you know what you're going into in the final exam period. Not that the focus should be solely on grades, but maybe just doing let's see where I'm at, get a temperature for each of your courses if you haven't already. So listing your courses out, doing a grade estimate or kind of grade check for each of your courses. And then the next important step is to think about or start knowing exactly when the date, the time, and the test location of each of your final exams are. And beware, there are some final exams that might not occur at the time of your actual class, or they might not occur in the exact classroom location that you have been in all semester. So what we want to point out to you is where you can locate this information. And so if you go to the registrar's website, you'll be able to locate, let's pull it up.
Oh, there we go.
Okay, so you'll be able to see the a grid in front of you that has each course listed, the professor, and then the date of the exam and the location of the final exam. So please be aware that there are different sections. So just like an example, accounting 101 or 102, there are multiple sections. So you want to make sure that you are looking at the correct section, the correct professor, and then noting this information definitely in a planner, your calendar, on the final exam prep worksheet, so that you arrive on time, that you know exactly when your final exams are, so that there are no mishaps with that. But again, this is on the registrar's website, registrar.georgetown.edu. You'll go to the final exams link, and then you'll be able to find this information.
Great. Thanks so much, Annie. One of the things I would also recommend too is if you do have a change in your final exam schedule, like a different time or a different classroom date, go ahead and put that into your planner or your phone so you get a reminder. So when all the stress of finals really starts snowballing, you know where to look for that, and that's just one less thing to worry about. All right, so we're moving on as part of the worksheet, and we're moving on to step 2. And step 2 is identifying the test format for the exam. So whether this is a essay exam, a take-home exam, if it's going to be a little bit of a mashup between multiple choice, true or false, short answers, the content covered. It could be a cumulative exam from the beginning of the semester. It could be just kind of the last couple of chapters you guys were reviewing. Again, the content sources. And when we're talking about content sources, we're not just talking about like your books, but we're talking about notes. You can get very specific with the dates of your notes, PowerPoint slides. Is there outside research that you've pulled from? So really take kind of wide perspective when thinking about content sources and what you can use as study materials. And then the last section on this worksheet, or this part of the worksheet, is a to-do list. And I think that's really helpful in either looking at, do you need to annotate any lectures? Are there any just missing assignments that you need to make up? Is it flashcards? Is it summarizing notes? Maybe you missed a class and you need to connect with a peer to get those notes from that class. So looking at these types of things really helps you stay organized and kind of minimize some of the stress. And so one of the things that we do want to talk about is and Stanley, thanks for adding Stanley just added the registrar link to the group chat. So if you guys have any questions, thank you very much, Stanley, for adding that in. You guys can click on that link and make sure you're in the right places for exams. So one of the things that we want to talk about today is that there are some different kind of strategies for taking different testing formats. And so we're going to explore a couple of those now. So one of the first and most common types of exams is a multiple choice exams. And so some of the strategies that you can consider when you're taking a multiple choice exam are, I think, especially important if you like to interact with material, if you're a visual learner, circle or underlining important words in the questions, reading all the answer choices before selecting one. It seems like a really, common, I should read all the answer choices before selecting one. But sometimes when you are worried about time limits and getting stressed out, you won't necessarily read things thoroughly. So make sure you're stopping and slowing down, reading all the answer choices, reading the question correctly, and then cross out the answer choices that you are certain are not correct. One of the things I think we hear a lot about from our professors and faculty is that you can interact with the exam unless your faculty member says explicitly not to, but you can write on the exam, you can write notes to yourself, you can cross things out. Use that, interact with the exam. Look for the two answer choices that are opposites, because usually if you can find the two answer choices that are opposite, one's probably correct and the other one is wrong. And then look for hints about the correct answer choice and other items on the test. And this is actually something I would encourage you guys to do for exams that are not multiple choice exams as well. Use those context clues as you're working your way through the exam. Look for answer choices that contain language used by your teacher or found in your textbooks. We talk a lot about this in our note-taking webinar, which is on our website if you want to look back on that. But your teacher has a certain tone. You've spent all semester with your professor and they have a certain tone. So being able to sit and be able to read those questions in that certain tone. Don't change your initial answer unless you are absolutely sure another answer choice is correct. I'm going to mute everyone just so we can hear. Choose all of the above only if you are certain that all the other answer choices in the item are correct. Choose none of the above only if you were certain that none of the other items are incorrect. And this is where I think students get really tricked, is on these all of the above or none of the above questions. So really take your time, slow down, and make sure everything's either all correct or incorrect. Also look for options that contain other options. These are called umbrella options because the other options fall within their scope. So again, using those context clues to kind of dive in and help you figure out other questions.
Thanks, Ashley. The one that I really like about the strategies that you just mentioned is noting questions that are similar in nature, really using those context clues. If there's a concept that you are looking at that falls within, number 3 on the test, number 5 and number 7, and you're really caught on number 3, but you were able to manage to answer number 5 and 7, go back to think about, what did I brainstorm? How did I answer this question? And then maybe you can go back to number 3 to say, give yourself like a jump start on how to answer the question. So those are really great tips. And that's the one I really enjoy, I think. And I've seen it work. So it's something to point out. Now we're going to look at true or false questions when it comes to final exams. So ensure that you're looking at absolutes. looking at always, never, all, and none when they're listed in the question. Okay, so always being sure that you're aware of those. Like Ashley mentioned, maybe highlighting or circling or writing those out so that you can be aware, and you can always look back to it to say, let me make sure that I'm using this information in my thought process in order to find the correct answer. Okay, next is choose true for an item only when you are sure that the entire statement is true. Okay, so ensuring that the entire statement is true. Not just part of it, not just a partial statement is true, but the entire statement. Okay? If a statement is more detailed or specific than most of them, chances are it is true. I don't know if this is intentional from professors, but they may add in more information to the answer choice or the question that is more true. Okay, so thinking about, just read the entire statement and start thinking about what context clues you have. If something is more detailed or specific, chances are that it's true. When you do have long sentences that include groups of words that are set off by punctuation, ensure that you're paying attention to the truth of each of these phrases. Okay, so you're looking at the truth of each of those phrases. If one is false, it usually indicates a false answer. Okay, and then thinking about negative words, and these are the ones that always used to foul me up, but thinking about the words that are used in the question. So if it contains a negative such as no, not, cannot, a really good strategy is to drop the negative and then reread what remains in the question. And what I would even do is probably rewrite the question without those negatives in it so that I can see the sentence for what it is. Maybe turn it into a positive is how I think about it. So as you drop those negatives, the no, not, cannot, decide whether that sentence is true or false. Okay, and if it's true, the statement is actually the opposite, which means that the statement is actually false. Okay, so reread those directions again, thinking about the negatives. If there's a no, not, cannot, drop the negative, read what remains, maybe rewrite what remains, decide if it's true or false. And then if it becomes true, thinking about, well, I dropped the negatives previously, so it actually is going to be the opposite. And then usually that statement is going to be false. And if you have questions on that, we can certainly work with you more one-on-one, but review that information and thinking about that going into your final exams. Okay, so matching columns. So you could potentially see this on final exams that you have. The idea behind this is to read all the items in both columns before selecting answers. I think this is a good test strategy regardless, to preview the information, preview each section so that you can feel acclimated or feel prepared going into the section. But part of it is reading all the items in the columns before selecting an answer. Mark easy choices first, and then eliminate as you move to the more difficult ones. So the ones I would do a scan and say, okay, which ones can I match correctly? Which ones can I match more efficiently? And then the ones that I might have a bit harder of a time for, we want to save those possibly for the end so that you can budget enough time. But marking the easy choices, and then as you go, you're eliminating your options. So you're consolidating the amount of options that you have left, which can help kind of problem solve or figure out what the remaining items are. Instead of looking at one word column first and trying to select a match, read the column with the definitions or the explanations and then match the word to that. So that might be easier. That's a really great self-testing strategy too, is to not just look at the vocab word and then you recite the definition, but flip it around. Look at the definition, look at the explanation, and you have to recite the concept or the vocab word. So something that I would definitely practice on your outside time as well before going into the final exams, but a really good strategy.
So when we're talking about essay questions, one of the biggest things that
they may take longer than other types of questions. So you want to really sit down and at the beginning of the exam, just kind of do a scan in general. I would recommend this on any type of exam, especially if it's kind of a multivariable exam. Take a scan of what you have upcoming and then be able to budget your time. You shouldn't be spending 10 minutes on this, but this should be like a 1-2 minute exercise of looking what's coming up. And then when you're talking about essay questions, especially if you have multiple essay questions, I would recommend giving more time for the higher scoring questions. The higher scoring questions are probably where your faculty are going to pay maybe a little bit more attention to grammar and spelling, a little bit more attention to, resources and support. So our recommendation is always give more time for those. Also, when you're talking about essay questions, watch for the key words in the question. So the keywords are like discuss, compare, define, analyze. Those are really triggering of what kind of type of essay you should have. So highlight those, understand those, write those at the top of your paper so you always know that you're doing a discussion or you're doing a compare and contrast essay. One of my favorite recommendations is called doing a memory jump. So I recommend this again for any type of exams, but especially for essay exams. This is also really good for if you're in the sciences or math and you have lots of formulas you have to memorize. Do a memory dump, do it at the beginning, so you're not kind of worried about keeping this information in your head as you're making your way through the exam, but jot down on a scratch piece of paper any ideas, facts, figures, equations, anything that you might need. Dump it so you have it, and then you can kind of go back and use that as a resource or kind of like almost like your own notes to go back and forth in to make sure that you're including everything that you need to in the exam. Another way to do this is just to make a brief outline of major points. This can be helpful if you know you have essay exams and you're kind of preparing for it. It doesn't need to be a full outline, but just make sure you have your major points written down so that you're incorporating them in. So you're not going back and saying like, oh, I forgot to include this, or I forgot to include this argument. So make that outline at the beginning when you're doing your memory dump. And then last but not least, proofread. I know there is a little bit more leniency with essay exams in terms of, grammar and spelling mistakes and things like that, but go back at the end, and this should be part of your budgeting of time, and take a couple minutes to read back, make sure you have everything included. There's no major mistakes. And I would really strongly encourage you to do this for any short answers, discussion questions, any type of kind of written out questions, anything you're using a blue book for. So go back and proofread just to make sure there's not any last minute mistakes that may have popped up.
Okay, so now we're going to look at strategies
for take-home exams. And this may not apply to you, but maybe at some point in your career at Georgetown, you will have a take-home exam. So here's some strategies to note for the future. We want to stress, don't just rely on your notes. We still want you to implement some study strategies before time and not depend that you're going to have your notes sitting right next to you. You still need to prepare just like you would for any other exam. Because potentially, your notes, you might take more time looking through your notes than actually answering the exam. So we want you to feel fully prepared, so ensuring that you're just not relying on your notes. And again, study like you would for an in-class exam. One of the best strategies that Ashley and I talk about is doing quizzes or exams, practicing any old quizzes or exams that your professors can give, or redoing any ones that you had throughout the semester in a classroom or test-like environment. Okay, so ensuring that you have set up your environment really productively in a structured kind of setting where distractions are limited, and doing those test prep strategies prior to getting into your exam will really be helpful. Read your instructions carefully. Okay, so sometimes maybe if you feel like, oh, it's a take-home exam, I don't necessarily need to pay much attention to it, maybe some minor slip-ups can happen. So ensuring that you're reading instructions carefully. One of the best things I tell students is if the instructions are confusing, to rewrite it in your own words. Or if there's a question that you're really confused about, rewrite it in your own words, or even do something like Ashley said, do a brain dump. Start writing down your ideas or what comes to mind when you read that question. And at that point, you start coming up with information that potentially could help you answer the question. But again, reading instructions carefully is a pretty general strategy, but something to take a little bit further is to rewrite it in your own words. For take-home exams, we definitely recommend not taking the exam with your classmates, ensuring that, again, you are setting up an environment where you are being productive, that you're not relying on others, you're not relying on your notes, okay? That's definitely an area where you can get distracted if you've got a lot of classmates around you. So ensuring that you're just taking the exam seriously and you're putting yourself in an environment that's productive. Check your technology, so making sure that you've got everything charged, that everything's working, whatever's downloaded needs to be downloaded. Ensuring that ahead of time, prior to going into this take-home exam, especially if it's at a certain time that you have to take an exam, if it's online, or just ensuring that you have all your technology up to date and charged. Organize your notes in a way that's easily accessible during the exam. So this is a really good self-testing strategy before going into the exam. Organizing your notes in a way that makes sense to you. Maybe it's based on concept and topic, and you can organize your notes in a way that makes sense to you. Maybe there's diagrams and pictures that you are organizing your notes in, but make sure those notes are organized so that you can access them easily during the exam and you're not flipping through your notebook, flipping through your textbook, furiously trying to find the information. Highlighting important dates and facts within your notes, summarizing main points is really helpful. One of the best things that we say when note taking is to put the information in your own words. You'll remember that information more later on than if you were to just write verbatim what's coming from the textbook or coming from your professor's lecture. So having all that information close to you, but in an organized fashion so that you can access it efficiently. Okay, so we did a webinar on online exams before, but this is just a recap. So before the exam, thinking about if you do have online exams, here's some good strategies that we're going to break down before the exam, during the exam, and after the exam. So before the exam, read and understand the test guidelines. Just like we talked about, ensuring that you're reading instructions carefully. If you do need to jot down some notes, if you can have paper next to you, that's a really good strategy to make sure that you are understanding what the guidelines are. Ensuring if you know that it's happening at a specific date and time, or if you can take it just during a particular window of time. So understanding what the parameters are for the exam prior to going into the exam. How much time will you have to complete the test? Are you given the entire class time? Are you given more time to complete the exam? So knowing all that information going into the exam is important. Is this a test that you can take at home? Do you have to take it in a specific location? Maybe you have to take it over in Lao. Maybe you have to take it at a computer lab, or you're able to take it in your home environment, your home office. So ensuring that you know how you're going to take the exam, what the time parameters are before even beginning the exam is a really good thing to know.
So to continue on about before exams, and this is especially important for all of my School of Continuing Studies students who are online. Again, knowing what the test format is really important. What kinds of questions will the instructor use on the exam, multiple choice, fill-in, short answer, essay. And this is really helpful too, to kind of go back to our earlier points, is if you have an online essay exam, still be doing that brain dump, still use those strategies that we talked about, but kind of have an idea of what you're kind of going into. Again, check your computer to avoid any last minute problems, as Annie mentioned. Carve out a quiet test taking spot with minimal distractions. So I know in my conversations with my students at the School of Continuing Studies, this can be really challenging when we're balancing work and families and life, and sometimes there's just not a quiet space to get to do an exam. We struggle just finding quiet spaces to do this webinar, so we understand. But practice doing the work and taking practice online exams in this environment. My recommendations to my students are always like, if you've got noisy animals or family or pets or kids, put a sign up on your door and saying like, from this time to this time, quiet, so you don't get any last minute people to pop in. And then finally, gather your resources. Make sure you have all your materials with you prior to taking the exams. One of the things about online exams is oftentimes you have more access to resources because you are taking them at home. So if you do have more access to resources, that's wonderful. But that can also be the challenging thing about online exams. So making sure, and I think we might get into this in the next couple of slides, but making sure that you have everything highlighted, any kind of resources or citing that you need to do, you have that out kind of on a scratch piece of paper, so you're not spending exam time flipping through books. You really should be prepped. All right. So during the exams, keep an eye on the clock. Set an alarm to notify when you have a certain amount of time left. Do that on your phone, do it on your computer, get an egg timer, whatever works. But this is especially important with online exams because I think sometimes when we're on the computer, we lose track of time. So we want to make sure you're giving yourself a 15-minute warning, a 5-minute warning. So if you need to go back and proofread, you can do so. Write short answer essay questions in a word processing program. This will make it easier for you to check your work and edit, and then you can cut and paste into the designated field. A warning for everyone, some different platform sites don't allow this. You actually have to type directly into the field in the exam, so make sure you know that ahead of time. And again, this is part of knowing what the exam is like, making sure you're managing your time, because we don't want you to end up copying and pasting with 5 minutes left, only realizing you can't, and then you have to retype everything up. So make sure you check that piece of it as well. Again, as I was mentioned, utilize all the tools that are available to you. So have a scrap piece of paper, make sure that you have those math equations written down, any formulas. If you need to cite a source, make sure you have that written down. If you have an idea for main points, do your brain dump. Make sure you're utilizing all those tools. Okay, and lastly, don't leave the test page. If you are permitted to search the web or use another website for information, do not use the same tab or copy of the browser. You may lose all your work. So start a different tab, open a different browser altogether is actually my big tip. So if you're using Google Chrome, open up Safari. Make sure you're not exiting away from your test page, because I've had this happen to me personally and it definitely exits out. So pay attention to that. And then again, check your work before you submit. You should be doing this on all your exams, but I think sometimes with online exams, we think autocorrect, just spelling is happening automatically. But go back, check your work, make sure everything's answered. You didn't accidentally miss something, click through too fast. And then the biggest thing about online exams that we hear a lot about is technical problems. And our biggest recommendation that Annie and I talk to our students about is don't panic. This is common. Instructors sometimes expect this. So our recommendation is contact your instructor immediately, detailing the exact problem that occurred and any error messages that you may have received. If you are able to, take a screenshot. That is really helpful for professors and just in terms of honesty and our student code of conduct, making sure that it was an honest mistake, something might have happened. It's online, we get that technical problems pop up, but it's also helping for resolving those issues. So if you can, take a screenshot, contact your instructor immediately, and let them know what's going on. They get it. They're human. They understand.
Are on step 3 of our handout, which is talking through test prep strategies. And what I like to think about is also self-testing strategies. And I talk to a lot of students about the way that you are testing yourself prior to an exam. So assessing your own understanding of the information is what a test prep or a self-testing strategy is. So you can see some simple test prep strategies include study groups or working with a partner. I also suggest students, if you don't necessarily have a peer or a friend or anybody that you want to work with or teach material out loud to, you could always record yourself. So using the voice memo app on our phones, talk out loud, teach through a concept or a certain math problem, record it, and then listen back to it. And as you listen back to it, you can have your notes in front of you and check to make sure that you answered the information that you wanted or, said everything correctly. Flashcards are really good, reviewing old exams, quizzes, review sessions if you're professor or TA host review session. So really thinking about, Ashley and I are striving for students to think about specifically what things they are going to do to prep for the exam. When students just say, well, I'm just going to study, we say, well, what does that look like to you? So thinking, specifically and realistically about what things you can really do to maximize your productivity and ace these final exams. So a few test prep strategies to think about is ensuring that you're breaking the course material down into study-ready chunks, especially if you do have cumulative exams, which I think is more common for final exams, thinking about how can you review the oldest material first and continue to build from there. But I wouldn't want to look at the entire semester's worth of material in one sitting. That just seems way too much, too overwhelming. Instead, can you say, okay, what did I learn the first week of the semester? Let me go back through my notes, maybe do an old quiz, maybe work out loud with a peer and talk out loud about my notes. Okay, now I'm going to focus on, week 2 and week 3. Later on in the webinar, we have some good study schedule examples that we want to get to. So this can give you a visual of what we mean by breaking material down, but thinking about how can you focus on specific material at one time and not everything all at once, because that's very overwhelming. So like I mentioned, dividing, your notes, organizing your notes by maybe a specific topic or a specific lecture date, and reviewing that information over a period of days helps with retention rather than these late night cramming or the 2-day prior to a final exam, ensuring that you kind of just looked at all the information all at once. Instead, we want to make sure that you're breaking the material down over a period of days. Like I mentioned, again, reviewing the oldest material first, especially if you have a cumulative exam, chances are that information is less fresh in your mind. So ensuring that you're going back to the beginning of the semester and reviewing that information. As you're going back through your notes, definitely start highlighting or circling information that's important, or maybe areas that you still have questions on. Write those questions down, and if you are offered a review session before finals, that's a great chance to bring those questions up. If you aren't necessarily offered a review session, make an appointment with your professor or TA. Maybe write an email and say, hey, these are the questions I'd really like to discuss with you. When is some time that I can come in and figure out, get some clarification? Or even work in a group and have your list of questions, share information within one another, with one another. Again, working with a group is really helpful. Everyone's understanding is different, and that can also help strengthen and clarify information for you. And of course, like we mentioned, take time to visit your professor during office hours to address any questions that you have. Don't leave them to chance. Ensure that you get all your questions answered before going into the final so that you are as prepared as possible.
And if you do have review sessions, go to them. It's helpful just to hear the information, and also it's helpful to be among classmates and be like, I'm struggling with this too. All right. If you do have to cram, which I have to officially say is not ARC recommended, but we get it, we were students, here are some strategies to help you have a little bit better of a cramming session. So first, try to avoid cramming at all costs. It's not great. Break down the material. So break down what you really need. Break it down into the smaller chunks, as Annie was talking about. And again, we have some good study schedules you guys can use to help you do that. Summarize all the main points in your own words. This is going to help your brain retain the information better. So any of the main point you have, jot it down in your own words. Use that voice memo or just repeat it to yourself out loud. Implement any self-testing strategies. So if you're down to the wire, really start taking practice exams if you have any. Really start kind of getting down into the nitty-gritty so you can really highlight and focus on the areas that maybe you need just a little bit more time studying. Take breaks. This is if you are going to cram, if you're going to stay up until 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning, which again, I recommend you not do, schedule in some 15-minute breaks. So this should not be you study until 2 o'clock in the morning and then you start a binge watching episode on Netflix. You need to take a 15-minute break, either, listen to a podcast, listen to some music, go walk outside if it's light outside and you're comfortable to do that. But take a break to let your brain kind of rest process the information you just studied before you gear up again. Still make sure you get some sleep and healthy meals. I know can be really, really hard during finals. Again, we get it. But with sleep especially, we just did a really good sleep webinar with CAPS last week that's up on our website. But part of sleeping is helping you study. So your brain doesn't have time to convert your short-term memory into long-term memory unless you get some sleep. So the more you deprive yourself, the more you're not retaining that information, and the harder it is during exam day because you keep losing sleep from that sleep bank and you can't really ever make that back up. Don't learn any new material the morning of. It will just kind of really screw you up in terms of you'll forget older material, or you'll get really caught up because you haven't really had that much time to spend with the new material. So our recommendation is don't learn any new material the morning of, and this actually goes for any type of studying and any type of exams. If you want to do the morning of, you can review some things that you've already been over, but again, no new material the morning of. And then if you really have a limited time, as I mentioned, just focus on the material that you're not as confident in. We tell students a lot, you've been sitting in these classes for an entire semester, you've been doing the work, you've been hopefully taking the notes, participating in the assignments, so it's all there. Just focus on the materials that you're not as confident in to kind of help boost your confidence and self-esteem, so you're feeling a little bit better going into that final if you do have to cram. All right, so now we're going to get into how to create a study schedule. And so here are some things to consider when you go to create a study schedule. As we mentioned, you should be doing this now, or at least before study days. Know the material needs to be studied. So use that handout that's on our website. Use that to-do list to kind of help guide you. Figure out what your high and low periods of concentration are. Some of you might be super late night people. That's fine. I still recommend getting sleep again. But some of you might do better in the morning. So figure out when you know you're the most productive and try to schedule your hardest study sessions or hardest reviews during those times. Study in time blocks. Do 30 to an hour on and then take 10 to 15 minutes off. And so this goes back to incorporating breaks. Study the same subject throughout the week. I know that we're running short on time, but if you can, try to stay with the same subject throughout the day, or at least that morning, and then switch to something else in the afternoon, so your brain's not popping over from different subjects, and that's when you get things confused. Take into consideration your environment. We do not recommend studying in bed, in front of the TV, in noisy places. Really go someplace, the library, Levy Center, go someplace that you know you can get work done, you can stay focused, and there's not too many distractions. For me, when I was in school, I always had to get out of my room, because if not, I would start cleaning the house or start a Law and Order SVU marathon. So make sure you are getting out if you can and studying a place that really helps you become your best learner. And then take into consideration your learning style. So if you're an auditory learner, use those voice memo apps that Annie was talking about. If you're a visual learner, make sure you have lots of your highlighters or note cards or things you can do. And then use any of the tools or strategies we talked about today. And when you're creating a study schedule, which we're going to get into, you're really not just saying, I'm studying from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. on history. You're talking about, is your material already organized? You know what chapters you're studying, you know questions you need to follow up on. It really should be intentional when you're creating a study schedule. So now we're going to go through a couple examples of study schedules. All right, here's the first one, which I like. I think it's pretty realistic. It's 5 days out. And as you can see, we talk a lot about this building upon each other. So you start by reviewing the oldest material first. So on Sunday, you're preparing chapter 1 and you're blocking out that time, as we mentioned. On Monday, you're preparing chapter 2, but you're only spending 30 minutes reviewing the material that you prepared the day before, right? So it's kind of foundational. You're slowly building up to get to the point where you are in this semester. And on Tuesday, we're adding a little bit more in. You're now going to prepare chapter 3. You're going to review 30 minutes for chapter 2, but you see this chapter 1 review got cut in half because we already reviewed it the day before. And then on Wednesday, we add in chapter 4. We start cutting down chapter 1 review for 10 minutes. We cut down the chapter 2 review for 15 minutes because you've had the longest time with the material at this point. And then you're adding in the preparation for chapter 4. You all might also, in meeting in with study groups, add those into your study schedule as well. And then you can finally see for Thursday, you're reviewing all the material in decreasing order from what is the newest to the oldest. We can just all make sure we're muted so we can hear. And then again, self-testing, we can't hit home on this enough. Self-test, self-test, self-test. This is really going to give you a very kind of accurate example of where you are in terms of your studying, what areas you might be really comfortable in, and maybe some areas that you didn't think about that you might need to go back and review. So this is an easy way to do it. You can kind of put it out on a Post-it note, put it on a bulletin board in front of your computer, so you have it and you have a plan for the next 4 or 5 days. All right. So here is the 7-day study plan. And this one's really great because it's broken down. It's a little bit longer, but I kind of like the guided questions they have. And they give you some really great example study techniques on the side that you can kind of mix and match. So day 1, you're evaluating and organizing. This is where you need to have very honest conversations with yourself. What is your current grade in your class? What grade you need to get? What is this test covering? So going back to our resource that we pointed out, what chapters are on it? What type of questions is the professor going to be asking? How caught up in the course are you? Kind of use the scale of 1 to 10. Are there other things that you need to do? We're realistic. We understand there might be some catch up during this time too, but use that, implement that into your study schedule so you're not feeling overwhelmed and you have a very clear picture of what needs to get done. What study materials do you have? Is there another book you need to check out? Is there a PowerPoint maybe that you didn't download from Blackboard or Canvas? What are you missing? Think about those things, and that's really day 1. Day 2, topics to cover. So you want to outline what you're covering that day. And then what you want to do is use a kind of a mix and match of what's going to be best for you and your learning styles and what's the expectations for the class. So for day 2, you see you have a recommendation of G, A, B, C, D, E, F, and K. So maybe creating an outline, doing practice tests, right? This can be something that is done every day. Rereading lecture slides, elaborating and adding notes. So using your own words, as Annie has talked about. And then this goes on for day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5, and day 6. And as you can see, you can really dictate what topics you're covering during those days. But if you notice, the study strategies start to decrease, right? So you're really getting honed in, and you're not, again, introducing any new material. Again, self-testing is included, I think, in all but day 4. So try to make that part of your regular study schedule routine. Day 7, or your last day, should be general review. So doing kind of a complete review of everything you've covered, and really highlighting any weak areas or areas that you might just need a little bit more time with. So use this day before to do the test review. No new information should be learned. You want to focus on the difficult areas that you are experiencing. And again, get good rest. We really encourage you guys, if you are able to get 7-8 hours of sleep the night before exams.
Study plan that we're going to talk through is another 5-day study plan. So you can say 5 days out, the first step is going to organize. So you want to organize, review your class notes, ensuring that you are coming up with a list of topics that is either going to be on the exam, definitely, maybe areas that you want to focus on or that you need additional clarification on. Maybe list them in the order of importance. So if professors have outlined, they're giving you a review sheet and they've listed out what topics they want to focus on or that you should focus on, make sure that you have that information in front of you as you're going through your notes so that you can organize your notes efficiently. Fourth day before the exam is the review and recall day. So you want to review your notes thoroughly. Again, recalling the most important information. Concentrate on the topics that are more difficult for you to remember. This is a really good time to do some self-testing. We don't encourage you to just read, and reread your notes. Okay, you have to engage with the material a bit deeper. So maybe do a Quizlet test to see what areas you are still a little bit weak in and focus on those. Use some mnemonic devices or visualizations to help you recall the information more effectively. So think about what types of strategies can I use to recall the information at a later date. Day 3 is to rewrite. So briefly rewrite all the important information, put that in your own words, okay? Rewrite is a really great strategy. Try to recall your own explanations, and that's going to be more effective rather than just what the text or that your professor has said. So rewriting things in your own words and rewriting them repeatedly is going to be helpful. Day 2 is the question phase. So make a list of questions that might be on the exam and answer them in as much detail as possible. This is a really great self-testing strategy. So predicting questions that you think are going to be on the exam and then going through your notes or trying to answer them, especially for open-ended questions. If you already have some prompts, ideas for essay questions, ensuring that you are practicing that skill prior to going into the exam. And then day 1, so the day before the exam, reviewing your notes and your rewritten notes just a few hours before the exam. Like Ashley mentioned, this should not be the day that you are learning brand new information. We are ensuring that you are just reviewing the previously learned information, taking time to relax. Maybe you do a meditation podcast the morning of, or you go for a really long run to let yourself feel as relaxed as possible going into final exams. Okay. If you're afraid that you're going to forget information or have that blanking out feeling when you receive the exam, like we mentioned before, write reminders or do a brain dump instantly on the back of the page or on a separate sheet of note paper so that you can have that information to reference and you don't feel like you have to hold all the information in your mind at one time while kind of thinking through the other information on the exam. So get that information on the paper so it's a good reference sheet.
All right, so I know this was a little bit of a longer one, but we appreciate everyone sticking in. Good luck with finals, first of all. If you have questions or you want to follow up on one of the strategies that we talked about today, absolutely feel free to get in contact with either Annie or myself. Again, Annie is the Learning Skills Specialist on main campus, and you can email her at arc@georgetown.edu. And we also have some of the handouts, I think, right in the front of the office on main campus. You are more than welcome to pick up, and I believe the final exam one should be there. If not, we will make sure it's there by tomorrow. If you have questions for me, I'm the Learning Skills and Disability Advisor at the School of Continuing Studies. You can email me at arc-ses@georgetown.edu. Again, hang in there. Winter break is almost here. You guys, it's 2 weeks away, so I know it's a stressful time, but try to take care of yourselves, sleep, use your resources on campus, and then last but not least, we will be going on hiatus until we're back for the spring semester. If you have questions or feedback or suggestions for upcoming webinars for the new semester, you can always provide us feedback at https://tinyurl.com/ARC webinar feedback form. Again, thank you guys so much. Best of luck with finals, and we will see you all in the spring semester. Bye.